Hello everybody. Today we will be looking at NCEA Level 1 Music Theory. Firstly, let's talk about clefs. Now what is a clef? Well, a clef can help us identify what notes are where. See, this is the treble clef and this is middle C. Now, I'm going to teach you a couple of mnemonic devices to help you identify the notes in between the stave. So, first off, we have the notes that are in the spaces. So, an easy way to remember that is face is in the space. So that means we have at the bottom F, A, C and E. Face is in the space. Next we have the notes that are on the lines. Now this one is a little different. It's called every good boy deserves fruit. So here at the bottom we have E, then we have a G, then we have a B, then we have a D, and lastly we have an F. For notes that are below or above the stave, you can just, if we know that this is F, you can just count up. So if that's F, then this next note is G. Then we start introducing ledger lines. So if there's not a line for you to go to, then you introduce one above. So here we have a G. The note above that, on that line, is an A. Similar on the bottom. Here we have an E. We can remember that by every good boy deserves fruit. That's how I got the F. That's how I get the E. Then below we have a D. Then we introduce a ledger line and we have C. Now this C right here below the treble clef is what we refer to as middle C. And I'm just going to write that up here, middle C. Now, using the treble clef, I'm going to put down a few notes that I'd like you to pause the video and try and work out yourself. Okay, so let's have a look at what these notes are. Here we have a G. Now we can remember that with our line mnemonic device. Every good boys deserve fruit. Next we have a C. Now we can remember this with face is in the space. So we have F, A, C, and then E. We have an F. F, A, C, E. Lastly, we have a D. And we can remember this with every good boys deserve fruit. And there you have it, all the notes for the treble clef. Next, we have the bass clef. Now, we're going to use some more mnemonic devices to work out the notes on the bass clef. For the notes in the spaces, we have all cows eat grass. Starting from the bottom, we have A, C, E, and G. All cows eat grass. Next, we have the notes on the lines. Now we're going to use another mnemonic device. Gum, boots, do, feel, awesome. Gum, boots, do, feel, awesome. So we have G, B, D, F, and A. Gum, boots, do, feel, awesome. Now we're going to do a quiz on the bass clef. Now I'd like you to pause the video and try and work out these notes on the bass clef. Cool. So, this first note we have is an A. And we can use the mnemonic device, all cows eat grass. Next we have a D. And we can work this out using a mnemonic device, gum boots do feel awesome. Next we have a G, and we can work this out with the mnemonic device, all cows eat grass. And lastly, we have a B, and we can work this out with our mnemonic device, gum boots do feel awesome. Similar to the treble clef, if notes go above or below the stave, then we introduce ledger lines. Here we have a B, and we can work this out with the A that is down here that we know. So we go A, then B, and then here we have middle C. And that introduces a new ledger line. Similar to below, you can work out the notes below. And that's the bass clef. Lastly, we have the alto clef. Now, unlike the other two bass and treble clef, there is no mnemonic device for the alto clef. This line here points to middle C. From that, we can work out the notes above and below. this is C, then this is D, this is E, this is F, and so on. Similarly, we have the notes below, B, A, G, and so on. I'm going to put up a few notes, and I'd like you to pause the video and try and work out what these notes are on the alto clef. Alright, so here we have a B. We can work this out from this being middle C and a note below it being B. Next we have an E. Same way, this is middle C, D and E. And here is middle C, as it's on the line that the arrows point to. And then down here we have G, where this is B, this is A, and this is G. Alright, that's everything you need to know about clefs. Okay, so next we're going to look at keys. Now, as you might have seen on lots of pieces of music, often at the start of the bar lines we have a key signature, such as G major. And now we're going to look at how we can identify all of the keys. Now, let's look at C major for example. Now I'm going to teach you something called tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. Now, this means that a tone above C will give us our next note. Now, most likely you might not know what a tone or a semitone is. So, here we'll look at a keyboard. Here we have C. Now, a semitone is one step above C. In this case, it's C sharp. So, a semitone above C is C sharp / D flat. Then next we have a D, and D is two semitones above that, or D is a tone above C. So from C to C sharp is one semitone, and from C sharp to D is another semitone. If we have two semitones, then we have a tone. So our next note is D. So let's go through. So here we have C, and now we know that D is a tone above. So now I'm going to write out the pattern that you will need to remember. Tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So we have a tone above C is D. So why don't we go a tone above D? then we will have E. Now, if you are unsure on how I'm getting this, you can have a look at a piano and work it out yourself, or you can draw a mini piano, making sure that you have it relatively accurate. If we have C here, then we have 2 sharps, then a gap, then 3 sharps. So then we have our D and our E, and next we're going up a semitone, and a semitone from E is just F. Then we can work out a tone above F, which is 2 steps, 1, 2, which brings us to G. Then we go up another tone to A, another tone to B, and lastly, once we're at B, which is here, we want to go up a semitone, which is just back to C. So, from this tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, we can find that C major has no sharps or flats because it does not go onto any of the sharps keys or the black keys. So, for our key signature for C major, there is no key signature. Now let's look at another scale. So for example, let's look at D. Now we're trying to identify the sharps or flats that D has. So I'm going to draw up a mini piano, of which you can do in the final exam. So here we have C, so we have D, which is here, then we've got gap, gap, and so on. So here we have a D, so we want to go tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. Now what you will find with each scale is it will always have the same notes, but the only differences will be where the sharps and the flats are. So for example, in the scale we have an F sharp. Now we'll work that out shortly, but how we know that it's not a G flat is because we already have a G already. Now we'll go on further and then I will explain it a lot better. So next we're going up a tone, which is to E. And here we just have a natural E. So we're going up a tone which is 2 steps above E. So we're going 1, 2. Now this is to the F sharp I was telling you about. So here we have F sharp. Now it doesn't go D, E, G flat, it goes D, E, F sharp because that's the next letter in the alphabet. It's an F of some description. So it's an F sharp because it is above F. So next we're going up a semitone, which is to G, and we can do this by going up 1 step, which is to here for G. Then we're going to go up a tone from G to 1, 2 to a natural A. Then we're going to go up a tone from A. So we're going to go 1, 2, and it's a B, a natural B. So we're here at a B. Now we're going to go a tone above B. So we're going to go from B, up one, to C sharp. Now, why that isn't a D flat is because throughout our scale we have one of each note. So D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp. And then lastly, our semitone brings us back down to our natural D. So, as you can see from this scale, we have 2 sharps. So that means that D major has 2 sharps, which are both F sharp and C sharp. Now, how we will write this on the key signature at the front is F will always be first and it will be up the top. So here we have our F sharp and then our C is next and it's on the C. And if we have our key signature here, we no longer need our sharps or our flats, in this case sharps, on here, because when we get to our F, we read it as an F sharp. So that's the D major scale. Now we're going to look at a scale that uses flats. And then from that you will be able to work out all of the key signatures for all of the keys, and that will help you a lot in the final exam. Okay, let's look at the B flat scale. Already we have one flat, but let's work out if there are any others. So, here we have B flat. Our next note is going to be a C of some description, then we'll have a D, an E, an F, a G, an A, and finally back to a B flat. Now I'm going to write out the scale as notation. This being our B flat. So, using tone, tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone, we will be able to work out using tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, we will be able to figure out where the rest of the flats are in the scale. So, a tone above B flat is indeed C. So, I'm going to draw up a mini keyboard to help us visually be able to see the scale. So, here we're going to have our 3 sharps, which means B flat is here. Then we're going to gap, then 2. Then we're going to gap, then 3. And we're going to leave it to there because this is again B flat. So, C is a tone above B flat because we have our sharp, then semitone, semitone to C. So 2 semitones is a tone, therefore C is above B flat. Then we want to go a tone above C. C, C sharp, D, That's two semitones, so that is indeed a D. Then we want to go a semitone above D. Now notice how a semitone above D is E flat. Now how this is not a D sharp is we already have a D in the scale. Otherwise it would go B flat, C, D, D sharp would have a flat and a sharp, which would get confusing, and would have two Ds in the scale. So here we have E flat, which is the note we find here. Then if we continue through, you will work out that there are no other flats. So in this case we have B flat and E. So if we get rid of these flats, so if we put up our key signature here, we have all the B's are flattened and all the E's are also flattened. So here we have the B flat major scale. Now, some others that you can do them with any note at all, where it will be important is identifying intervals. So now we're going to look at intervals, and keys will help you tremendously to identify some of the intervals. Let's get into it. Okay, so now we're going to look at intervals. So I'm going to write out the C major scale. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. And as we can recall from before, C major has no sharps or flats. So, now we're going to identify some intervals. So, I'm going to write up some so this is for the perfect intervals. So, here, if we had two notes beside each other, in this case we had a C and another C, the interval is a perfect interval, and the degree is unison, which means the notes are the same. So here we have a perfect unison. Now, if we have a C and an F, which here we have an F, if we have a C and an F, we also have some sort of a perfect interval. But instead of it being a unison, in this case, it's an interval of a fourth. This is because from C to F is 4 notes. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 to get to F. So, next we're going to have another perfect interval, the interval between these two notes being a perfect fifth, because there are 5 notes between C and G. We have C, D, E, F, G. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, the same we can get with C to C. Now, this is not a unison because they're not the same note. They are an octave apart. So, a perfect octave. And we have the notation 8VE for octave. Now, for these notes that aren't perfect, we call them major. And we'll get to why they're called major in a few minutes. So, here we have C to D. So, C to D is a major second. Second because there's two notes between C, D, 1, 2. So, let's look at our next note, which is an E. So, C to E is a major third because we have three notes. 1, 2, 3. C, D, E. And we can keep going with our A being our major sixth, and from C to B being our major seventh. Now, why we call these major is because if we flatten them, then we get minor intervals. So then, if we have from C to E flat, to E flat, we still have an interval of 3, so it's going to be a third, but instead it's going to be a minor third instead of a major third. Now, the reason I said that keys are going to be important for intervals is because an interval between, let's say, E flat and G, that's not a perfect interval. We relay the perfect and the minor or major to the root or the first note. So all these degrees are for the relationship between C and itself. So C to A flat is a minor sixth, but that doesn't mean that any of these others are minor or perfect. It's just from the root. So if we change the root, then we're going to have different accidentals. For example, as we know our D major scale, we have an F sharp. So we'll get into the F sharp and the C sharp and how they can be altered during intervals. So we have G, A, B, C sharp, and D. So the same perfect, major, perfect they're all in the same place. So let's have a red pen for P, for perfect, and we're going to have MA for our major intervals. So we're going to look at from D to F sharp. Well, this interval, as we know, is a major third. But then when we start putting the flats beside all of the major intervals, so we have a flat here, a flat here, a flat here, and a flat here, the flat and the sharp cancels out. So therefore, these are all our minor intervals. So I'm going to notate this as MI. So if we have D to F, then we still have a third because there's still 3 notes between them, but instead we have a minor. And this might confuse you because there's no flat in there. So how are we going to know if this is a minor? Well, it's quite simple. Before we had a sharp, and we know that F sharp is a note of D major. So if we are relaying our D to another note, and it's an F sharp, then we know that that's a major interval. However, if we don't have that F sharp, then we have a minor interval because we no longer have that F sharp, so it must have been flattened to a natural F. Now, this can be done with any key. So if you're given a song that goes something like this, probably like this, then they tell you to identify this note and this note, and they want you to work out the interval between them, where you can go C, D, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because from C to B is 7 notes, so it's going to be some sort of a seventh. So we're relaying this note to the C major scale. And as you know, the C major scale has no flats or sharps in it. Therefore, this can't be a major interval, it must be a minor seventh. And as we know, B is our 7th note, and clearly it has been flattened, therefore we have the minor interval. Now you're going to have to be careful because in the exam they're going to give you intervals from different keys, and by different keys I'm meaning you might get an A, so you're going to have to relay an A to another note. And if you know the A major scale, or can work out the A major scale, you'll be able to find all the intervals that are perfect and all the intervals that are major. but also you're going to be able to know that if they've been flattened so that you have the minor intervals. One thing I really recommend when you get into the exam is to write down as many of the scales and how many flats and sharps each key has, because then you're going to be able to easily identify the intervals between two notes. Awesome. That's all for this session, and I'll see you next week with some note values.